we on? Can you hear us loud and clear?
Yeah, I can.
All right. 3, 2. What's going on, everybody? It's me, Asad Hashim Ali, back again with another episode of Behind the Grind. This time we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Vladimira. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce her surname.
I always hear this, but you're doing well.
Yeah? So far, so good?
You did well with the first name.
Okay.
And give it a try. On the surname. Briestenska.
Briestenska.
Very well.
All right.
You do well.
Okay, great. Because I heard you say this in your own podcast, and I was constantly hearing that on repeat, but I just couldn't pick it up. But Briestenska.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you were doing well.
Yeah? All right, awesome. Okay, so we have Vladimira Briestenska with us. She is super well-rounded. I found her on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and then I started following her on Instagram, and I saw all the work that she's doing. And what's amazing is that she's doing it out of Pakistan. She has her own podcast called Naked by the Future Farm, which is all around entrepreneurship and emotional well-being for these founders. Did I get that right?
Yes.
She's also the founder of Neem, which is a fintech company and has been in the scene for quite a while with multiple ventures and multiple avenues as well. And she's got a track record of entrepreneurship and advisory for many nonprofits, startups, and organizations all around the world. And in her past life, what I picked up on was that you were working predominantly around organizational development and inclusion in organizations.
Yes, that's true.
What have I missed out? What are you really doing? Is this it, or is there more that's not available on LinkedIn?
So in terms of what I do, you covered most of it. I also try to support sometimes through investments, other businesses, especially women founders.
Okay.
That's sort of my sweet spot.
All right.
So just recently, I'm going to promote her a little bit because we have the chance.
Yeah.
I invest into beautiful business that is promoting mental health in the Arab-speaking countries. It's called Noor.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of my passion. But
Very
beyond that, it's very much the Future Farm, very much Neem. So it's Pakistan, building businesses, and in between trying to live a life and keep a little bit of a balance.
Cool. So what were you up to before moving to Pakistan? What was life like?
What was life like? So my path to Pakistan was not necessarily narrow. Like I didn't have it on a vision board, as some people think when you're planning your sort of life and everything. But I always knew that I wanted to be more present in emerging markets. I've done some work in East Africa, and it really connected with who I am. And I felt very much a great sense of belonging. And I wanted to work in a space of entrepreneurship and tech. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. Okay. Neither have I studied it. So let's put that up front. Hardcore. Yeah, very much so. I actually, frankly, had to use quite a lot of my elbows in terms of I guess, finding some acceptance and tolerance back home when I said that I wanted to go study human rights and journalism, which I did. And then I started in the foreign policy space. So I went with a big vision of, I guess naively a little bit, of trying to change the world, as I think many of us are, started with that in our young teens. And I thought I will do it from a space of diplomacy and foreign policy.
Okay.
And so that brought me to Brussels, which is sort of a heart of foreign policy or European policy in Europe. It was a beautiful experience. But after a few years, I felt that I was, one, too young to really drive some real change. And second, I didn't have much experience of just seeing what's happening on the ground. I mean, the real problems for people. You're sort of building policy, but you don't really know how it sort of impacts people on the ground. So that's when entrepreneurship kicked in my life, and I was amazed by the spirit of the people, of the hustling, of the fact that you could take it into your hand and say like, okay, this is the problem I'm going to solve for. I'm going to try. Yeah. And these are the ways. And it was just very addictive. And
it was that direct impact that you saw as a result of all the work that could go in.
Yeah, I think that was one of the major elements that really made it for me. Because I remember coming back to Central Eastern Europe. So I come originally from Slovakia.
Okay.
It's a small country, beautiful country, but I say this every time, maybe I'll repeat. People in Pakistan, they laugh. They say it's 5 million people in Slovakia. They say it's like one Pakistani wedding.
Okay.
So, and I got to learn that it's nearly true, frankly.
All right.
So the path sort of to entrepreneurship was very much when I was in the foreign policy. You have impact, but you also work with people of a different mindset. What you get in entrepreneurship, the people you surround yourself with, that stamina of experimentation, of risking, of just hustling. We were just talking before we recorded about it, and I actually forgot the word in Urdu, but I think it was something.
Jazba?
No. I think it was
Jugaad.
Jugaad, which I loved, and I think that's actually what made it for me, and the scale of impact you can do by building technology business specifically.
Interesting. Okay, so then what got you to Pakistan?
So open mind,
Okay.
I would say. Again, the passion for tech, the impact through tech, and then opportunity. So basically, as you said, before Pakistan, I was working in London. So I was a little bit more sort of based in Western Europe. I was working with a lot of early stage tech founders,
Okay.
especially around financial technology space.
Okay.
Again, never came from that. It wasn't like financial services were my passion, but it turned out to be because I started digging deeper and I saw how much financial wellness, and we can talk more about it, can really be an enabler for a really big major change for somebody in life. So being in London, working with those entrepreneurs, I've got a call from Neem, who is my business partner now at Neem, and who is also my life partner. So that's where it gets interesting. But when he called me, we were not life partners, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to Pakistan. I'm going to work with the biggest mobile wallet in Pakistan, JazzCash, and the team is sort of looking for some help in building culture and thinking about operating system, financial wellness, a thesis, and we've done a lot of work before." At first, I was like, how can I come to Pakistan, do anything about company culture?
Yeah.
It sounds like complete oxymoron, right? I mean, a white woman, know nothing about Pakistan. So, but then we talk it through. And I think it was important for me to think about it differently, to come with a sort of a humble mind. I was a little bit afraid, not of Pakistan as a country. I mean, there is a lot of bias around the country you come in.
But there's a lot of unknowns as well about the entire space.
So much unknown. And I think that's where the fear comes from.
Right.
It's from the ambiguity, from the unknown, right? And then you read few headlines, and that's not how I felt, but a lot of people around me. So when I said I'm going to Pakistan for a project, people were like, really? But they were sort of used to already from my work in Kenya and stuff. But it was like every day you were sort of moving one chapter, sort of further ahead. But that's not how I felt. I felt very curious. There was excitement, but there was a fear. But the fear was coming not from the country itself. It was coming from, I guess, the responsibility of coming with my white privilege to a company where I know very little about the culture, and I was supposed to share my experience. In my first day, I met my counterpart, Fakhr, he might be listening. I'll tell him to listen. So hi, Fakhr. And he was very kind. We sit down and we basically build a partnership where I told him, look, I have my experience that I gained over the years in different markets. You know your people, you know this market, this culture. Let's work together. And I think that's what made it work. I loved it. Awesome. And this was about 5 years ago, and I never looked back, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember when you mentioned this story to me at your office when we first met. At that time, I was just actually kind of amazed by that. That's the approach you took. Because you could have come, and this often happens, and I'm not just saying this is in Pakistan, but I'm sure even if a Pakistani goes to another economy altogether, they also might come from that same mindset that, I know what I know, and I'm speaking from a global perspective, so listen to what I have to say and start implementing that. But you took the more humble route, and I'm sure you also found you said partnership.
Yeah.
You found the middle ground to bridge the gap altogether.
Yeah.
Knowing that it can't be executed only by you.
Absolutely.
But you could be part of the thought process and the ideation onto what has to get executed.
Yeah. So there was a process to it, but you said it beautifully. And I think I learned from experience of others. So I was sort of reading up and listening up to stories of other people who were sort of in my shoes and how they've been rejected in similar circumstances when they came with this I know it all approach. And it just didn't feel right. So I didn't want to do it that way. And I think it was also driven a lot from a space of intuition and just connected on a human level. And then, as you said, like, okay, we have a common goal. Let's see how we can partner on it together. And I made a lot of friends ever since, and we are still in touch. And it was
Sweet.
quite beautiful.
Sweet. Awesome. So when you were moving here and when you started working with Jazz Cash as well,
Yeah.
what were your initial observations of, because you were working with people and culture, like of the quality of, let's say, human resource or of the entire infrastructure over here, the economy, the landscape? What were your initial observations like?
So I think, when I joined Jazz Cash, it is a bubble on its own, right? And for a year, I sort of lived in the bubble, although we tried to venture out and travel and see the country, because for me, that's very important, is to start connecting with the reality, actually. But I was saying before that I think only after that year when we left Jazz Cash and started building Neem, that was the first time I think when I really saw what Pakistan has to offer in terms of its talent and the tech space. But I think in my even the first few months, I was frankly quite amazed.
Really?
But it might be, I'm going to call it out, it might be that maybe I was coming a little bit with an unconscious bias of saying that I am coming to frontier markets. I don't know where the talent is. But I think what amazed me was the hunger. Like, people were really hungry for knowledge. And I felt that the culture that we started building there, and this is also to a lot of credit to Nadeem, that as a leader, he brought that with him. It was, we tried to create a safe space, open space, and then allow people to ask any questions, allow people to experiment, and all that sort of what we call it buzzwords. I mean, you read in the books about it, but I saw that when we started sort of bringing it in and celebrating it with people, they started really sort of, getting into it, and that was beautiful to see. So I felt that on an individual level, we were able to meet a lot of exciting people with a great potential. Maybe as a collective or organization, I think I'm generally quite skeptical around corporate sector. So I think there was a lot of sort of space for improvement, and it is a big machinery and big ship, and it moves slow and all of this. That was one of the reasons why after 1 year also we decided to build Neem and sort of move away. But I think my sort of immediate reactions were very positive around the talent. And I think one thing that is also that I found was different from, let's say, my experience in London or US, building relationships and bonds with people, much easier, at least for me in
Over
Pakistan.
Here?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, big time.
Awesome.
I feel like in London, you have to go through a lot of layers of the person to really connect with them on a human level. Here I felt that maybe there was one or two, but very quickly people took them, put them away.
Guards go down.
Yeah, guards go down, and you connect on that, true sort of level, and as a person to person, and then it's beautiful to sort of it's a great ground to build friendships on, and so I really enjoyed that. I mean, it's something that I really sort of cherish in my life. So
interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to segue into Neem.
Okay.
So how about you tell us a little bit about what Neem is? What's the story like? What are you guys doing?
So the story actually started before we came to Pakistan, and we didn't know it. As I mentioned, we did some work in East Africa, and we did it around something we called financial wellness. A lot of people thought it's just a different buzzword from financial inclusion. It well might be, but we gave it some value and definition. So basically, the financial inclusion was defined as giving people access to bank account. But for a lot of people, that doesn't really impact their lives in a positive way. I mean, it gives them some access, but they bring in money and take them out, don't stay within the system, don't have a financial literacy. So when we thought about, okay, this cannot be it. I mean, this is not necessarily the driver for change. For me, especially was important around women across the world, because the sort of financial literacy and financial wellness of women is really where we are lagging behind globally. So we started looking on what we call today financial wellness, and we defined it as ability to bring other financial services to people, the ability to take a loan when you need it, ability to insure yourself against risks, like let's say in COVID, losing a job, but you still want to pay for fees for your child to go to school. But also ability to invest a small money that you have, fractional ownership. Now in Pakistan, it's very exciting. There are some companies building fractional ownership for, building a property. So all of this is actually what can create the wellness for an individual, right? So did some work on this before coming to Pakistan. Then we tried to implement a little bit of this at Jazz Cash. I think partially we might have succeeded. And then because of all the reasons I mentioned, because it was a corporate and sort of throw us out in a way, that's reality. We met our third co-founder with whom we connected spiritually. His name is Neem Zamindar. Neem is a persona on the market. A lot of people know him. We didn't know him that well. But very quickly we connected on the vision of bringing financial wellness to people in Pakistan. He was a forward thinking. And as I said, he was also a very spiritual being. So on the value base, we connected very well. And we shook hands a few days after we left Jazz Cash with Nadeem and Neem. And we said, okay, let's do it. Cool. That was an evolution to that story, but maybe I'll pause just for now.
Very cool. So how are you implementing all of this now? So how are you actually providing that access or wellness to the underserved communities? Here?
So there are different ways how you can do this, right? As with anything. The one thing that we learned in Africa and even in sort of environments that I come from, like Slovakia, in some ways still a very much developing, underdeveloped market, but also in UK, although a lot of people don't think so. There are a lot of people who don't have access to financial services. So what we learned on those markets is that the trust of people towards the financial services institution is the key element that makes it or breaks it. And so when you come as a new player in market like Pakistan, yes, you can be known as a persona, your name, but if you're trying to impact the lives of Kriana store owners or farmers in KP or women, artisans up in Hunza, they have no idea who you are, right? I mean, they see some white woman. Why would I ever trust? It's completely disconnected. And they don't really care. Exactly. So that was our challenge. And so then what we thought is that our way to impact those individuals is to already find what we call communities that already have a relationship and trust built with those people. So as an example, there is a major agri-tech company out of Islamabad that already is serving about 60 million farmers across Pakistan.
Wow.
They provide them advisory services about weather, how to take care of the crops, livestock, etc. And so what we thought is, instead of Neem going and meeting the farmers and trying to build a trust, and as you said, they don't care about what Neem is unless you have really something to offer. We said, why don't we leverage the trust that this company already has built with those farmers, and we provide our financial services through this company. So that's how Neem sort of approaches how we approach our financial wellness. So for the past 2 years, really, we have been building those deep, loyal relationships with those communities across agriculture, the micro SME space, right? I mean, it's huge, the informal economy around Kriana store owners, with some women communities that are heavily underserved. And what we are doing is that we are sort of, I don't want to go too technical, but we have
feel free.
Let's say a financial technologies platform, tech platform. And in the fintech terminology, it's called embedded finance. So the embedded integrates, right? We integrate the financial services like payment solution, lending, ability to insure your crop against the bad weather. We embed it through those existing communities, and then they provide it to their end customers. So it's a little bit differentiated. We have a high hopes that this is one of the ways to really get to the end users and leverage somebody else's work and trust the people who have been on the market and have been really nurturing those relationships.
Okay, so what are there any kind of regulatory restrictions to actually execute this, or that
Sure.
you're facing right now?
Sure. So you have to have regulation. I mean, there are different ways of licenses that you need. Maybe some of the listeners, you will know that there is now a pretty big buzz around the digital banking license. A lot of players are applying for it. We have a different route. The reasons being that, it takes you about 3 years from the moment you get the license to actually be live and start sort of impacting the real masses and scale of customers. We have 2 other licenses. One is partnerships with existing banks that already gives us some capability. And then for us to be able to provide some lending, we have another license that is related to stock exchange.
So this is kind of like what
SSCP.
Finja did. They piggybacked
A little
off
bit.
Finca.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In the model, very much so. We like Finja very much. I mean, we think they're brilliant entrepreneurs, really sort of soulful people. We have similar model. The difference is that, for instance, for the lending, so they're providing lending to a lot of Kriana store owners. They really hustle it. They go on the market. They have their sales force. We go through the community sort of model where we partner with companies like OneLoad that is already serving or has a network of about 35,000 Kriana store retailers, and we plug it through OneLoad or Digicata or Retailo and many other new players. So that's our way.
And these other existing startups are completely cool with partnering up and collaborating?
It's a little bit of, it depends. It's a little bit of evangelization that you have to do. And rightly so. I think for them, the important moment is to understand what is the value for them as a company and for the end user. Because I believe like today, every company wants to be a fintech company. So yes, whilst that is true, there are different ways how you get there. You don't necessarily always have to build that financial services capability within your own company, right? It's a very different business to build. So we are putting on the table very much the partnership collaboration model. If you look globally in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in LATAM, there are a lot of similar models and those partnership work. Those companies are valued high. Not that valuation is something we hunt for, to be honest. I think there's a little bit of buzz around us these days.
Yes, I get that.
But yeah, I mean, there is a track record that going the route of partnership and revenue shares and sort of leveraging each other is a very sort of nurturing way to go forward.
Okay, interesting. Very cool. So I'm gonna segue into the podcasting life.
Okay.
Tell me about Naked. What is it? How did that start?
Okay. So first of all, I'm really enjoying this. And I told you this before we started recording because I have a respect to fellow podcasters. We started Naked podcast, I think about 2 years ago. I'm quite bad with timings, but I think it's 2 years. And frankly, it came from personal experience and also observations. Again, as I mentioned, I worked a lot with entrepreneurs, whether I supported them or I was sort of co-founder, so had sort of personal experience. And the one thing I saw is that we focused heavily on supporting entrepreneurs through that business building experience. So like you guys at Backstage and a few other businesses, if you join Accelerator or you get investment from an investor, most of the conversation will be around building the business, your KPIs, your financials, building the team. Very little of any conversation is about how are you doing? As Assad, how are you doing as a human being? How are you navigating this roller coaster of very little of sleep, of pressure, of sort of showing up for your investors, for your team, for your family, for your co-founders, for your peers. The list is long. And the conversation is very minimal. So
it's not just minimal from the outside world, but then also internally it's just like not happening. I would say as well. Like, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, but you are very right.
Like at Backspace, what Nagini and I do is that like we've always had that kind of trust with one another to make sure that there's that support system going on. Previously, I was the operator. Now the roles have changed, but then at Alt, Bilal and I are also just making sure that we're keeping tabs on one another. But sometimes we forget to have the conversation as well.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the
okay,
reality.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't pressure yourself for not being perfect. But I think that's beautiful, and you should nurture it. That would be my one reaction. And the other is that when we started Future Farm, which is sort of the organization that produces Naked podcast, with Nectarius and Nadim again, we just looked around and we felt that one, there was very little of conversation. Second, every magazine you read online or took in your hands had this headline, which was about success and raising this type of funding and unicorn and how hustling it and not sleeping is the way.
Yeah.
And we saw the reality, and the reality is very different. It's not the way. I mean, if you follow this way, then you're going to burn out very quickly. If you read on some of the research, it's not only around burnout. It's good that you are hydrating yourself because that's part of it. But there are some really disturbing statistics around suicides of founders, and we talk very little about them. So we said, okay, very important. Let's start doing something. And we started from a place of building awareness, and that's why Naked sort of was born. It's a place of conversation, safe space. We bring entrepreneurs and investors from really anywhere in the world, and the conversation is very little, if at all, about business. It's about them, the experience they are going through or went through, and talking about the emotional struggles, how they navigated it. A lot of the people we talked to on Naked were still within the dip, which was pretty fragile. And so hence when I told you that sometimes it's emotionally exhausting to record those conversations, is very true, because you give a lot of, you're there, you're present with the person. To some level, it feels like a small therapy for us and sometimes for the guest. So, but we believe it's very, very important. And people do reach back and say, it's important. I never really talked about this before, and it was a cleansing experience. And so that was the why.
Wow. So when I started Behind the Grind, my initial tagline, spiel, whatever you want to call it, was that it's where we sit with people whose story I admire, people whose grind I admire, people who are just trying to do cool shit on a regular basis. That was the exact phrase. And then when people would come on, I can totally understand about why it's emotionally draining, and because it had oftentimes conversations do end up becoming a bit about like a bit of a therapy session.
Yeah.
Or they end up really exposing themselves as to why they ended up working so hard also to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And in all disciplines, it's just that what I find very interesting is that regardless of which niche you're in, what vertical you're in, whatever you do, there's always a similarity to be drawn as well. And and this actually goes into my next question, is that from your experiences, have you seen organizations, or I would hope so, but have you seen organizations value this sentiment and actually provide some kind of coaching or provide some kind of mentorship for the leaders of that business, or create some kind of conversation internally to make sure that there's something going on, like Thrive Global, for example? I'm sure you've heard of. I know that Thrive has so many products around that for the entire team, but then oftentimes leadership is, I feel like good leadership will end up taking the brunt of what the team has to end up facing in the first place. So have you seen any programs that are in place?
Yeah, just on the leadership, right? I mean, there's a book, I think Simon Sinek wrote, is that the leader eats the last. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of truth to it, but it's in many ways, it's also disturbing and harmful, because that's one of the issues, that you deprioritize yourself so much as a founder of the company, both on the, I think primarily on the financial level, but also, I mean, the financial compensation, right? Founders often are, especially of startups, are paid, let's say, after 3 years. I think there was even a statistics that I think a majority of early stage founders live, and this is quite sort of dramatic, under the level of poverty for the 3 years of starting their business. And that means all kinds of things. And I've heard quite horrific stories of how people sort of hustled or survived through those first 3 years. But yeah, so sorry, but that was a derail. But coming to your question, do organizations value, do they do something meaningful? I think we are certainly seeing a shift. COVID has helped a lot.
Okay.
And the reason being, especially when it comes to the employees' well-being and mental health, because frankly, just a lot of people struggled. The numbers of mental health challenges across the employee space has grown massively through COVID. So if you want to create a nurturing environment, you just have to address it. So it was sort of a must-do exercise for a lot of companies. Are a lot of those interventions authentic and genuine and effective? Questionable. So the place where it comes, like why people are doing it is equal questionable to whether it's a ticking box exercise or there is some real impact. That's on the side of the employees. On the side of the founders and the leadership, I think it's even less so. Again, it comes from a place of just, you prioritize the team and the business and the customer, and you will somehow push through. We are now exploring collaborations with investors because they're a big part of the problem for founders and their mental health.
Okay.
We are in conversations with beautiful group of investors really globally, from New Zealand, Hong Kong, some in Pakistan, US, etc., name it. It's great to see that there are some, they're genuinely now trying to learn what are the ways I can support my portfolio founders. And that's by, can I pay for some of their mentoring, therapy, coaching?
Wow.
Can we create those safe space peer groups so they can talk? So that's there. At the same time, we get a lot of people saying like, not my responsibility whatsoever as an investor. This is your personal stuff. Figure it out. I don't believe that's so. I think we are all part of a bigger system and we all have to take part of responsibility. So I think still a big push that we have to do. I think it's great that even today we are talking about it because that's part of the awareness raising and destigmatizing. I was very excited having a Pakistani woman founder on Naked, Fatima Mazhar from Collabs. She was very genuine, very authentic, very vulnerable. And there was a lot of good feedback around it. So even, in places where it still feels heavily stigmatized and tabooed, I think it's about the time that we start breaking it. And leading by storytelling, I think it's a beautiful way to go. So in companies, you can also create those safe spaces, maybe conversations.
This is really giving me some flashbacks as to what we all faced during COVID at Backspace, at least, because we tried really hard. We worked really hard to make sure that everyone could just be free, be vulnerable as well, and open. But good to know that you're working with investors as well to change the conversation for founders too. But a little bit deeper into leadership and entrepreneurship, are there any similarities that you've seen, or what are your observations on Pakistani leaders and entrepreneurs versus those that you've seen in the West, like even if it's just London itself?
Got it. I've been asked this question before, and I think my answer hasn't changed, which is that I see more similarities than differences. Okay. That's for first. Especially, I think it might be also my experience working in different tech entrepreneurial ecosystems at the stage of when they were very nascent. So if I'm even thinking back in Central Eastern Europe, so I was part of it when it was really just blooming. And it reminded me Pakistan now at this day so much. There was a lot of hunger, a lot of this drive. People were sort of jumping ships, and entrepreneurship became an option for graduates to do something afterward. It wasn't anymore the KPMGs, EYs of this world, McKinsey's, right? I mean, that was a wave. That was the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And now there's this whole hype around join the startup ecosystem. Think about being part of the entrepreneurship, which I think is beautiful. Not that one is better than the other, but I think it's awesome that we have optionality. So I see a lot of that excitement. I saw it in different markets. I think the one thing, but I already told you this, is the openness and maybe a little bit more of scrappy. We are coming back to the same sort of essence, ethos, is that I find Pakistani entrepreneurs really sort of hustlers it's a street smarts.
Yeah.
Although I met a lot of people who have all the, big universities, big titles, but just 2 days ago, we had an awesome interview with somebody who has a local Pakistani university. It's not one of the top universities in Pakistan. And he was so beautifully confident when talking to us by saying, I joined this space and I love it because nobody asks me really about my university. They ask me about my approach, about my experience, about my attitude. And I love that. So I think a little bit more of it here than in the West. I still feel like in the West, your titles and status in some way matters a little bit more, even within the startup ecosystem. The relationships and how I think it's still quite a small ecosystem in Pakistan. So we all know each other in a way, which is a good and bad thing at the same time. I think that's different again from a mature ecosystem in London, right? I mean, although you might know people in fintech in London, in the wider space, it takes you a little more time and maybe you have to send 10 LinkedIn messages to connect to somebody. Here it feels that
it's more organic.
Closeness, the proximity, it's 2 layers, one. And I love that. So I think we should in some way keep that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so many years ago, someone gave me some advice, unsolicited, that, you should consider finding a job abroad and then come back and see what it's like working in Pakistan. And if you want to go the entrepreneurial route, then you might have like a chip on your shoulder. You'll be a notch above everyone else. Do you think that applies? Does that make sense to you?
I always tell to people, if you have the opportunity and privilege to travel, go. See the world, see other places, meet other cultures, learn more about yourself. I think that's probably the reason to go, is that through these experiences, you just explore more who you are. And then you are probably a little bit more grounded and you're wise of why you are doing things in life and what motivates you. It's a little bit more sharp and clear. So I would certainly back it up. Is it for the reasons you mentioned? I'm not sure.
But in terms of skill development, do you think that would help?
Might, but I think it's changing because I think the opportunities, to be completely honest, I think I would give you a different answer 2 years ago from what I've seen in Pakistan to what I see today. So I see talent that and then we work with them that have not gone anywhere in the world, didn't go outside, and the skills are similar to the level of what I've sort of experienced in London. And it's for the reason that now you have second, third generation of entrepreneurs from those mafia circles, right, as we call them, around Kareem and Airlift and Baikia and all of it. The pioneers, really, Daraz. And they've created opportunity for other startups to emerge. So for a lot of those people, the learning with those companies and building the skill set while observing, while learning with your leader, I mean, without hierarchy, I think it's a pretty great opportunity. So I wouldn't necessarily exchange it straight away for the ways to go outside and then come back to Pakistan. I think you can actually learn a lot here right now with the within the ecosystem and build something within. But yes, do go out, do travel, do meet other people if you have the chance for other reasons maybe.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. So I have a question for you, which actually wasn't in the list that I shared, but you mentioned that you invest in businesses and early stage startups. What's that like for you? What are you looking for? How do you approach investment at an early stage?
Yeah.
Personally, how do you approach it?
So I only invested into one startup.
Okay.
That's the truth.
Okay.
I have been part of angel investing,
Okay.
where it was also together with Neem and stuff. So I was learning and observing, and then I did one on my own, which I'm very proud of.
Nice.
But so I'll answer from that
Yeah.
place of truth and that level of experience. So when I decided to invest to Noor, so what was important? Noor is the name of the business. What was important for me is that, so at once the reference to this business came from another fellow angel investor. She was a woman. I know her track record, so that played a role for me. So that already gave me sort of a trust or established one level of trust. And then I met the founder. It was important for me personally as Vladimira is that it was a woman founder. She told me about her why. The why you are building this business is very crucial for me because I know that your intrinsic motivation will sustain you when I can't swear here, but the
Feel free if you like.
hard stuff
Yeah.
kicks in.
Yeah.
It will be your why.
Yeah.
That will be your compass,
Yeah.
right? And so if I'm not saying you have to have a lived experience of that problem, it might be also that you saw it in your close surrounding family, and that was the case for Shahira, the founder of Noor. So I could authentically connect with her why. Then she told me about the vision. How is it different from other competitors in the market? I found it very pioneering, but still quite grounded in numbers and sort of facts.
Yeah.
She was quite clear about what needs to happen in terms of the roadmap, how much she needs to raise funding because it's a venture-backed business. And frankly, took... I think 2 calls and exchange within emails. It was very quick.
Wow.
So I think, to be honest, as an angel investor at an early stage, I think we should be a little bit less risk averse and a little bit more bold and kick-ass. And the reason for it is that if there are people out there who are trying some pioneering thing and you really love them as founders, you think, them as individuals have a lot of potential, even if this doesn't work, they will find a way. The why resonates with you, then go for it. I mean, those are not huge checks.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be fair from my side to ask for a deep due diligence and bother them with this. I think as they grow on the journey, that might change.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the place for an angel investor. I think it's more of a soul's fit and a belief. Because if not us, then who?
Yeah.
So
and I think that's the key. You don't just want to use the title of an angel investor for the sake of it. You actually also have to believe it, internalize it, and move forward with that approach from the get-go.
Being the angel. Yeah, if you actually
Be
look
the
back
angel itself,
where it comes from.
Yeah.
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 I guess so. There's a reason for it.
Cool. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
And this is something I ask everyone. If you could go back in time and meet your younger self, what would you say to her?
So you did send me this question. So I did think about it a little bit. I would say just don't take yourself too seriously.
Okay.
That would be one for sure.
All right.
I think it's related also to just don't rush through experiences. Don't try to build up a resume. It's your path has its own pace. Enjoy the experience when you have it.
Yeah.
Don't always look for the new thing on the horizon. Because it might just very easily sort of, get through your fingers and you will not even sort of feel it and be really within it. So that's for sure. Keep nurturing your friendships and community. That's a big one. I think double down on it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's what's going to stay with you. Those are, the people, the relationships.
That's the first time I've heard that, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, nobody's actually ever said that.
Yeah. I think, really that's what sort of gets us going in the moment of hardship, right? I mean, the fact that I'm as a founder, maybe I have a hard moment, but I know that I have few people who I can call anytime, and they don't have to be my family necessarily. They can be my created family, so my friends and people I love. So yeah, I think those would be few. And maybe a last one is that you have nothing to prove to anybody. So don't do decisions in your life because they're driven by the wants of your parents or the FOMO on the market. You have nothing to prove. Just get to know yourself a little better and keep investing into yourself as well, into who you are.
Great answer.
Well, I don't know if they're great, but they are mine. So,
no, that's awesome. And super valuable. I think this was a great conversation overall.
Likewise, I
hope
really
you had
enjoyed
fun.
it. Yeah,
Yeah?
very much so. As I
Great.
told you, I was very excited, and my whole team knows that I'm here, and they're excited equally. Yeah.
Awesome.
So.
I was hoping that you'd bring someone with
Oh,
you.
really? I didn't know. Okay, so I'll tell them.
That's why we
maybe
even set up
next time.
like an extra chair on the side as well.
Oh,
in case
that's
someone
sweet.
want,
Okay, well, don't tell me now. I will feel bad, but okay, maybe next time.
Next time,
when we invite you to Naked, maybe we
I'd be down.
we can see.
Yeah,
and then we'll make a bigger gathering.
Awesome.
But thanks for having me. It
My
was
pleasure.
a
Thank you
great
for coming
pleasure.
on once again. That was Vladimira from Neem. If you'd like to get in touch with her, you could reach out to her, I'm hoping.
For sure.
And have a watch or a listen to her podcast, Naked by Future Farm. Thank you for listening and watching. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.